It's been a while since I've done a video, but I am back and we're going to kick things off with this, the Mercedes-AMG A45S. Now, I've got this car over the weekend and I want to see what this car is actually like. A big shout out to Virtue Mercedes-Benz, go check them out in the links down below, and also a big shout out to my mate Gok, the AMG Lounge. Go check them out if you want to get a deal on a Merc AMG. So then, the A45S, it has a 2-litre turbocharged engine, it's got a clever 4-wheel drive system with drift mode, it's also got a whopping price tag. This one is a very low-key spec car and it costs a smidge over 50 grand. But is it worth the money? Well, I've come to Wales to find out. Now, before I delve into what the new AMG A45S is like to drive, let's quickly recap on what made its previous versions so appealing. In 2013, Mercedes unveiled its first ever hot hatch, the A45 AMG. It boasted a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder which produced 355 horsepower and 332 pounds-feet of torque. It was also the most powerful engine per litre. Not even the Bugatti Veyron or the Porsche 991 GT3 could match that. It drove through all 4 wheels via a 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox and could go from a standstill to 60 miles an hour in just 4.6 seconds. And it also had a base price of £36,000. But once you add the necessary options, you are looking at a £45,000, well, not a hot hatch anymore, a hyper hatch. A couple of years later and the baby AMG got a facelift with some updated tweaks to the engine and chassis. The motor now produces 376 horsepower and unfortunately the price also got updated as well too, as if the A45 was not powerful or expensive enough already. Fast forward right now with this new version and it carries on with the same mad philosophy as the old one, but with a difference. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, the all-new 2-litre turbocharged unit now makes 416 horsepower and 369 pounds-feet of torque. 0 to 60 happens in just 3.9 seconds and has a limited top speed of 167 miles per hour. The powertrain is all new too. An 8-speed twin-clutch gearbox has been added and the biggest headline of them all is its new 4-wheel drive system. Mercedes call it 4MATIC Plus, and you might think it's the same one that's in the E63S. Well, mechanically it's not. The A45S has a pair of clutches for each rear wheel and can send 100% of its power to one of them to aid traction, and more importantly, some oversteer. In fact, it has a drift mode just for it. There is so much tech to talk about in this car that the video could drag on for 30 minutes long, and let's be honest, no one's going to watch a 30-minute car video. So, the simple fact of the matter is this: is it worth the £50,000 asking price, and is the A45 finally a fun, engaging, 4-wheel drive sort of Mitsubishi Evo-like car to drive? Here we are then, driving the AMG A45S. Now, I've had this car for a couple of days now, and I've driven it on various different bits of road, really. I've driven it around the city of central London, I've done motorway miles in it, and now I'm on some of the best B roads in the UK to see what it's all about, to see what it's like. Is it a proper driver's car, and is it better than the outgoing A45 AMG? Let's do a bit of history here and talk about the outgoing A45. It was pretty much insane in terms of its straight line performance and its powertrain. And then obviously later on they updated it, it had 380 odd horsepower, and it shocked people once more. It was very fast, very sure-footed, but to drive it was never going to be a tail-happy, crazy AMG like you would get from the E63, C63 and so many others. But the people who bought them liked them because, well, they felt special in it. It had that lovely parpy, crackly 4-cylinder soundtrack, and it also had really cool looks. It was also the cheapest way of buying into the AMG brand. And Mercedes have sold quite a few of them, despite the hefty price tag. Now moving on, we've got this with 421 horsepower, which is, once again, insane, nuts. So, what's the cabin like? Well, inside it's pretty much, well, the new A-Class. So you've got these 2 digital screen displays, you've basically got voice activation, which is quite cool if you're into Marvel and Iron Man with Tony Stark. I think it's quite nice. At night time, the cabin is a very special place to be in. You've got different mood light settings. These seats, these are the same bucket seats that you find on the outgoing Mercedes A45 AMG and various other bits. Very supportive, very huggy. Maybe after 2 hours, 3 hours on a long journey, you will need to climb out and basically stretch your legs a little bit. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but it's acceptable and it looks gorgeous, especially this interior colour. It's got yellow trim with black. So cool, really, really nice. All the options have changed now on the A45 AMG. You can't really specify certain individual bits. You can either get it as AMG Premium Pack and AMG Premium Plus. Now, Premium Plus gives you the aero bits like the spoiler, the front splitter, etc. Personally, I prefer it without the aero kit because I like the subtlety of this car. This car without the aero kit with its small wheels, in my opinion, looks really, really cool. Imagine this in a dark blue colour or a stealthy grey. You wouldn't think of it much compared to a normal A35 AMG, apart from the front grille, of course, because that's obviously different. So when you're potting around town in the A45 S AMG, what's it like? Well, at first you find that the suspension is very, very firm. It's obviously been stiffened quite a lot, and it's got these frequency dampers which change depending on the driving modes. In fact, there are quite a few driving modes in this car. You've basically got a snow mode, you've got comfort, you've got sport plus, then you've got race, and then you've got individual. So there's a lot going on, and the first time I climbed aboard in this car, I actually thought, geez, it's hard to actually get my brain around everything, mainly because I'm an idiot and a simpleton, but there is just at times, at first glance, a bit too much for my liking. Then I spent a little bit more time with it. Then I got used to these touch pads on the steering wheel, which controls the main display here for your speedo, and also the main screen for your sat nav and your Bluetooth and all that crazy stuff. On the motorway, it's quite all right. You do get a little bit of road noise at higher speeds, and it does abrupt the phone conversations a little bit. I was chatting to a mate on the way down here, and I pretty much had to slow down to about 60, 50 miles an hour in order to hear the conversation. There's quite a lot of tyre roar coming from these Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres, but it's a good tyre nonetheless. Right, that's all the boring stuff done. Let's see what this car is like to drive by switching the driving mode, which is really, really cool. It's got this clock display, and basically when you turn it, you've got this really clever LCD graphic which changes, which is really cool. So if I ramp it up to sport mode, you do get a little bit more throttle response, and the ride becomes ever so stiffened up. What I then do is go to Sport Plus. In fact, I think Sport Plus is the best mode of the lot. You can go to individual and obviously turn the dampers into its softest setting, but I just leave it in Sport Plus, and then I switch the gearbox to its manual mode. Now we get a little bit more noise. Mercedes have deliberately put the peak power and torque figure all the way in the high RPM. So you need to get it past 5,000 RPM in order to get it really strolling along, and it pulls all the way to the red line, and it does reward you. You also get more noise in the cabin. Mercedes says it's not fake. In fact, it's basically a sound symposer which records the outside noise and amplifies it into the cabin. To me, it sounds really nice. In fact, it's very much parpy and rally car like, and I pretty much like it. As I mentioned before, it's an 8-speed dual clutch gearbox, and the shifts are pretty much immediate, but every now and then, once you're in the high RPMs, there is a little bit of a delay. It's not as sharp as other rival gearboxes, but it's quick enough. You just are amazed by the performance of this car. It's just crazy how this car attacks a road. But we've also got the 4MATIC Plus, which is a clever four-wheel drive system that uses clutch packs on either side of the rear wheels. Now, the outgoing A45 had a Haldex four-wheel drive system, which, let's be honest, is basically a front bias four-wheel drive system, which, if I'm honest, you can't really tell what's going on with the rear axle. It just feels like a front-wheel drive car with infinite traction. And if I'm honest, that car just ploughed onto a lot of understeer. Like I said, it had tons of grip for when you're launching it and going into corners, but it was never an engaging car to drive. AMG reckons that this is far more promising to drive. Do you know what? This four-wheel drive system is actually very, very clever. It's the same sort of setup that you would find in the Mark III Ford Focus RS. I've driven that car, and if I'm honest, I wasn't too impressed with the four-wheel drive system. It felt a little bit, I don't know, fake, if I'm honest. It would send power to one given wheel, whereas this does the same sort of thing, but it's way more effective. It's also very, very clever as well too, because what it does is even in normal running gear, this car does have a drift function, but even in normal driving modes, like in sport mode right now, it can sense me going into a corner. And what it does is it brakes the inside wheel and then overloads the outside, which then gives this car immense turning. It's very, very strange at first, but like in most front-wheel drive cars or most four-wheel drive cars, if you come into a corner a bit too hot, you back off the throttle and allow the front end to turn in. With this, you basically add more throttle and the car starts to rotate. And yeah, you never ever get any understeer. And if you do, you are basically going way too fast. Steering is all new for the A45. It's a bit quicker in its rack. I'll be honest with you, it's lost some of its feel from the old car, but it's a lot quicker and it works in conjunction with this clever four-wheel drive system. And you know what? You get used to it after a while and you appreciate how quickly you can turn into corners. This road is very demanding and you have to go left, right very, very quickly. In fact, speaking of left, right very quickly, the agility of this car, now the curb weight of this is, well, it's not light. It weighs 1,560 kilograms, which for a four-wheel drive hatchback is quite a lot, but I'll be honest with you, you don't really notice the mass, especially on the public road. Maybe if we go to a track, we would notice that, but today that's not what this video is about. Majority of the people, in fact, almost everyone who buys this car will basically want to know what it's like on the road, and most A45 owners will want to know, does it make a good noise? Is it cool? Does it have a funky interior? And is it worth the £50,000 price tag? We're getting there very, very slowly. So we've already mentioned the steering, we've already mentioned the transmission, we've already mentioned the motor. The next thing now is to actually wrap it all up and me to tell you a conclusion of what I think.
Well, what I think is this. From a handling and driving aspect, this is 10 billion times more enjoyable and more engaging to drive than the old A45. Some of the AMG nerds will point out that the exhaust note is a tad quieter than before. That's not really Mercedes' fault, that's just the EU regulations killing all the fun. But if that's a small price to pay for what is a sophisticated and exciting chassis, then so be it. The engine is so effective. It loves to rev all the way to the red line, and with them short gear ratios, it gives you the sense that you're driving some sort of crazy time attack rally car. Downsides, well, the ride is still quite firm. It does start to work and absorb bumps at high speed, but at town pace, it's just a bit too busy. So back to the question I've been asking myself and many others at the beginning of this video. Is it worth the 50 grand asking price? Once you add up the fact that you can demolish most supercars in the real world, carry 5 people and have the engineering and tech to back it, the answer is yes. The A45S is in a class of one at the moment. There are no rivals at all. But one thing is for sure, if I were Audi right now, I would be very, very worried.
Like a